see. Okay, so we're recording.
All right, so I guess I can open up in prayer, and then you can introduce the topic.
Sounds good.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for another chance, another opportunity to hang out, to think through, pray through, be still through a topic, and we invite you. We invite you into the dialogue. We invite you into the wrestling, and help us to be present. Help us to speak the truth in love. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Yeah, so this week, this topic was kind of in my mind just because of, a study that Pastor Vince shared about being thankful and having gratitude in all circumstances. And so it kind of led to just a dialogue and something that we were thinking about of what's the balance between like you said, Dolapo, the truth of how we feel about something, and then the truth of the facts of the situation, and how sometimes those things don't always match up, but both are important to kind of deal with and sift through. And so kind of how do we reconcile those things? So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think maybe a good way to also apply and introduce it is also, like, for me personally, I've been writing, and in my writing, it's really kind of a personal journal that I just happen to share. But even though it's a personal journal, I'm trying to give myself freedom to go to places that I normally wouldn't go, and not worry or think about how anybody will read it or perceive it, and just be present in connecting with how I'm feeling and what I'm wrestling through, and almost give myself permission to not be right, permission to not be factually correct, permission to not be logically sound, permission to not even be Christian, if that's what it takes to kind of engage with what I'm feeling. Because the purpose is kind of to connect with some of those things that I'm feeling and whatnot. And I think the model that I'm trying to learn from is the model of, like, David and Job, where they very much, you see David say stuff like, kill those people. In modern translation, it would basically be like, kill those bastards.
Yes.
And like, are those prayers? Are those requests to the Lord? Are those venting sessions? Are those lamentations? Are those just how he felt?
Yeah.
Is that what honesty is? Is honesty? So yesterday I was listening to a podcast, and it's kind of very weird podcast, but they were talking about, what is honesty? Is honesty just, I'm just gonna tell you everything, right? Is honesty, I'm going to think about why I'm saying what I'm saying, think about how what I'm saying is gonna affect you, and so it's basically all of those things, right? So it's interesting, as so for me, it's that question of, what is honesty? Is honesty just me being clear, transparent, see through, just, let it all out? Or is honesty being measured?
Mm. Yeah.
Um, um, and is it both? Is there a time where, you know, maybe like if you're at a pulpit, um, that may be not the time to just lay it all out, right? Versus maybe if you're in the comfort or the privacy of your own, right? And then it's your writing, is that kind of hybrid, um, and then it's, what's true is it how you feel, or is it what is absolutely true? And then what happens when um, you're in a gray and there's no absolute?
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, I think, that's kind of the topic, right?
Yeah. It's like there's the initial question, and then there's all of these other questions that stem from that initial question. And it's, yeah, because this is I think it's such a human issue, and it's such a, yeah, and I think that's the thing is if there weren't any gray areas, if everything was just black and white and made sense, there wouldn't be so many difficulties with it. But because there are gray areas and there are places where, yeah, things are in question, then it becomes challenging. um so one thing I wanted to kind of bring up as well is, so Pastor Vince, during his lesson on Wednesday, he showed a diagram, and it's like a picture of a train, and it was like a train engine with like two cars behind it, and the first one, the engine had the word facts written on it, and then the second car said faith, and then the third car said feelings. And basically the purpose of the diagram was this idea that your knowledge and understanding of the facts drive, your belief and your faith in those facts, and then your feelings would then reflect what you believe about those facts. Does that kind of make sense?
Mhm.
And so we had some we had some really interesting discussion about it, in our group time, just and as different people kind of looked at that diagram and reacted very differently to it, just based on different people's backgrounds and different people's ways of looking at things. And so I'm curious about, yeah, what should the process be like? you know where do those things come from? Because and I think when I was teaching on worship a few weeks before that, I kind of talked about a similar thing with that last slide that had the arrows on it, where it was basically this idea of what you know in your head drives what you believe in your heart, which then drives what you do, and what your habits become and what your character becomes. And it didn't really include emotions in that, but I felt like a kind of similar process of, that type of movement. And so um, I'm curious, like, what your take on that kind of progression is, or is that even a progression, or you know, is it something else entirely?
So that's interesting. Um, so okay, here's maybe how I will put it. I would say what you do is a byproduct absolutely of how you feel and what you believe. But I don't subscribe to the idea that what you believe is 100% responsible for how you feel.
Mm, okay. Yeah.
I think I think what how I feel Um, I think how I feel is because if you think of conscience, conscience has been right before knowledge ever showed up, right? Conscience is God's compass that He's invested in every single one of us. And a baby with zero knowledge has conscience, and that conscience bears witness to truth before that baby ever learned anything.
Yeah, I think it's in like Ecclesiastes where he says, yeah, his laws are written on our hearts. Yeah.
Mhm. So I think our feelings I think are the most true thing we have in our physical makeup. The problem we have though is we don't know. We leverage what we learn, right? And I think there's something missing in there, which is choice. We leverage what we learn and the choices we make. We use it to either temper down or temper up what our emotions and our feelings are saying. Does that make sense? So
Kind of, I think.
let me see if I can make it a little more clear. Um, I guess the best way of saying it is I don't think what we learn informs how we feel. I don't think what we learn informs our conscience. I don't think what we learn informs our heart. Um, I think okay, let me put it this way. Think of an adult father and a son relationship, right? Father-daughter relationship. I think the adult, the father, is the heart, it's the emotion, it's mature, it knows. The our mind and our choices is the child that is growing up. So the child would throw tantrums and whatever, and eventually even the adult father gets to a point where they're like, well, you've dulled me. I've been telling you go and buy a new car for the last 5 years and you refuse to listen. And it's almost impacting our relationship, so I'm going to shut up about it. And sometimes I think for us, we look at that and we say, oh, when the feeling stops suggesting or reacting to tell us, go buy a car, go buy a car, go buy a car, right? We basically assume that, oh, the feeling is now in line with I'm not buying a car or I don't need a car. But it's the adults or the feelings or whatever just stopped saying stuff about it. It still knows go buy a car is the right thing to do. Does that make sense?
Kind
No.
of. So this is an interesting thing. So, but then what if that like feeling is based on something like what if buying a car is actually a really bad idea?
So I don't think, and this is my premise,
Hmm.
I don't think the feelings are ever wrong. They're only just misinterpreted.
And how do you arrive at that conclusion?
Um, so let me give you an example. A guy breaks your heart, right?
Okay.
And you interpret it as that guy is wicked. Is it that your feelings were wrong if you find out that the guy is actually not wicked 10 years later? Or is it that what you felt you interpreted that way because maybe that's as much information as you have, or that's as much framework you have for interpreting what you feel?
I mean, I think that feeling would just be a reaction to the hurt of, that situation, basically.
Right,
The
right,
conclusion that you draw from it may or may not be correct.
exactly,
Okay. Okay.
exactly. That's exactly my point. So all our feeling maybe was saying at that point was I was hurt. Don't do that again.
Hmm.
The conclusion we slapped on top, right? So I
Okay.
guess that's
So you're
that's
saying
kind of what.
it's like the feeling itself isn't wrong, it's the interpretation that we apply to it.
Yes.
Okay.
Another example is, if you are bleeding internally and you start to feel pain, and then you go take Panadol, whatever is the ibuprofen, right? Panadol is a Nigerian thing. You go take ibuprofen, right? Ibuprofen actually doesn't stop the pain, or it doesn't stop
It doesn't
the
heal the
nerves shoot.
cause
It
of the
doesn't heal
problem,
the cause,
just
right?
masks the
It
symptoms.
just masks it, it just dials it down, right? But the body is still, right, ejecting out, I'm in pain, I'm in pain, I'm in pain.
Yeah.
Um, and so the person takes the painkiller basically with the feeling of, my knees are fine, I'm able to run, I can jump, I can do everything that I'm doing. Why is my body telling me that I have pain? Shut up, right?
Yeah.
And we do that. We take ibuprofen and all, to kind of do that. And sure enough, the pain goes away and you continue your normal function as normal and whatever. And the assumption is to think that the body was lying, or the body just needed to shut up, right? But it was right. It
Mhm.
was there is still, maybe that thing healed up after a while, whatever. But all the body was just saying is, yeah, you can take ibuprofen, you can numb the pain. Yes, you can decide to change your habit, you can to change your whatever. I'm just telling you that there is a pain here. What
Yeah.
you choose to do with it, how you choose to, you could decide, you know what, I'm going to completely change my routine because my body is saying that I have pain here. I'm going to completely change my routine so that this pain never happens to me. That's your business. The body never actually said you have to. All it said was, I have pain here. And I think that's what the the emotions and how we feel, that's really what it is, where it's a I don't think, you know, I don't think it's really ever wrong or right. I think but we definitely interpret it wrong or right, right?
Yeah. One of the analogies that Pastor Vince used that I actually really liked, and I think it kind of goes along with what you're saying here, is that is the analogy of like a check engine light on a
Mm-hmm.
car, where
Mm-hmm.
like the feeling is that check engine light, where it's kind of that signal where there's something deeper going on, and this is the indicator of that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that kind of is that
So
what? Okay, does that
it's
work with
funny
what you're?
because I was gonna bring up like sensors and whatever.
Hmm.
Yes,
Okay.
all the sensor does is says is just read you, you know, where and just say, I noticed it's like a heat sensor.
Hmm.
Imagine you walk into a room and somebody put, like, I don't know, like a very hot fan next to a heat sensor, but then there's a big air conditioner in the whole room. You walk into a room and the room is freezing cold, and you see the sensor screaming, it's hot, it's hot, it's hot. And you go, what's wrong? That sensor is terrible. You throw it in the trash, right? The sensor is not wrong.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think you know, from an from an emotions or whatever standpoint, I think really um, the 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 facts. I think the facts and choice. Um, I would almost classify emotions almost even under fact, or what I call data.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I would almost classify emotions under that. It's another data point. It's another, what's the word? Yeah, it's another data point. It's another fact. And the real question is, because if you think of it, right, there are therapists and many other people that literally their job is to help you interpret how you feel. And they present data to you to give you a different framework They try to understand, what are you feeling? What are you feeling is basically give me the data you're sensing. Because, you know, that's exactly what a medical doctor does. A medical doctor sits you down and says, okay, we're going to collect all these lab results about your body because we want to know what is your body telling us about where you are and what you are feeling physically. And I'm going to ask you a question. Do you feel symptom here? Do you feel this? Do you feel this? Whatever, right? And so they collect all that data and then they help you interpret that data because they've studied and they have layers and layers and layers of information on how to interpret the nuances of what your body is telling you. The travesty is we have nothing like that for emotions.
Mm-hmm. Right. And so we're like stuck to try to figure it out. Yeah. Yeah. So this is really interesting discussion for me personally, because I think as you as you know, I'm like not not a very emotional person. And it's not to say that I don't have emotions. It's that I think it's the idea of, and maybe it goes back to kind of my background of growing up. But just it's all about the facts. So like that original diagram I was telling you about, where you look at the facts and the faith, and then that affects how you should feel about things. I look at that and I go, all right, so we have the facts, we believe the facts, how I feel about them doesn't matter at all because it doesn't change the facts or anything. And so why would I bother you know even like messing with emotion if it's not, because it's not rooted in what the facts are. And so um I know, like, for myself, I tend to just kind of like, okay, we're just gonna like invalidate that. We're gonna say, okay, I feel this way about a thing. That's ridiculous because it's not based on a fact. So I'm gonna just throw that out. Is kind of the the process, and I'm like, that's probably not healthy. Um, but and I'm also like, I'm a mental processor, so what I will immediately do, and I think this is slightly better, um is have an emotion of some kind and be like, this is interesting. What is this feeling? Where is it coming from? What's causing it? Where did this come from? And then now how do I get rid of it? Especially if it's like a negative emotion. So I'm curious about like what that process looks like for you, being a different person than me. Um, and this is interesting because this is a topic that has come up quite a bit in my life in recent months and things, and just talking to different people and hearing about how different people process things differently. I don't know, is interesting.
Yeah, so for most of my life, I've been a very logical person. Very, very logical person. Basically, I process like the same way as what you described. Um, I was quite so I had logical empathy, meaning I stripped out so much of my emotions that I retained a good image by rationalizing how to be good and acting accordingly without any feeling behind it. So, for example, it's like, okay, so um, he's hurt, and because he's hurt, he needs help. Um, I'm going to spend my time trying to get him help. But all of that crying business, I don't care. I don't need to worry about that. As long as I get him the help he needs, I am being human, and that's good enough. That's it. Um, but the last 4 years, very much so the last year. One thing I'll just say with that is I've come to realize that how I feel is at the very minimum has the same weight as what I think, or I should say, how I feel is the truest data source to consider in any decision that I'm making. The reason being, um, um, how I feel is natural. It's nature. I cannot I cannot make it be whatever I want it to be. It has its own will and it follows a spiritual law. In the same way that a scientist that goes and studying nature cannot change the way natural laws will occur in order to win the contest, right? A scientist judiciously has to study, nature and gather as much data as possible and continue to like weigh, different laws until they find the one that creates whatever, or that teaches them whatever they need to learn about the experiment. So I look at my emotions as data points in the same level as whatever facts that I can collect. And the idea there is, and I think we kind of talked about this in a previous whatever. There's got to be unison. How I feel and about how I feel about something and the facts that I'm gathering, they need to be united before I make decisions. So what does that mean? It means that sometimes oftentimes logically, the equation for solution may be complete, but that may be because I am solving an incomplete problem, right? So let me kind of take it one step further. If I'm talking, let's say I'm talking to somebody that just lost, let's say, Joe just lost his dad. And Joe comes to me and says, yo, my father was paying my school fees. My father was sending me to college. My father was the bedrock of our family. My father was my best friend. My father was XYZ. And so he lists 7 things that his father was. And I sit there and I judiciously take notes. And so I take all 7 problems and I say, okay, great. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to get you somebody else that's going to sponsor your school fees. We're going to get you a mentor that'll be like a father to you. In fact, they'll be a better mentor than your father ever was. We're going to get you, find 7, 8, whatever, right? And then go back to the kid and say, does that work? And the kid is like, yeah, but the kid is still crying profusely. See, mentally, logically, all his problems have been solved because I have defined by listening to him 7 physical problems that he has. And I have tried to replace his dad, right, with the 7 things that I understand that the dad brought into his life. But he's crying because there is other problems that maybe he hasn't articulated to me. He's crying because even if you find a replacement for the problem in his life that his father stood in for, the father is still the father, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of, being what I've been trying to learn, because it's like I go in and I'm realizing, yes, I can solve all the logical problems, but if my emotions are still screaming, it's not because my emotions are off. It's because maybe there is something else my emotion is connected to. There's another problem that my emotion is connected to, and it's trying to tell me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, what that is, but I have to maybe listen different. I have to connect different. The way to maybe the way to find out what that is actually not to listen to what the person is saying, but maybe it's just to sit and observe,
Mhm.
right? Um, so that's been my you know, and then even kind of going back to that example, you may actually find that that child may not actually even care really about all the 7 things that got solved, right? Because he probably could have found all the answers to them, and maybe he doesn't even care about school. But if you solve the emotional connection that's lost,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Maybe that's the truest problem that the person has, right?
Right. Right. Um, yeah. So yeah, I'm thinking about this. This is interesting. um, but so my thought is this. So, you know, there what do you do with pieces of scripture, for example, like the one you know, one that people quote all the time is that passage where it says, you know, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked, and all of that. There's that, and then there's also, you know, when Paul talks about like rejoice and be thankful in all circumstances and for all circumstances. And I think in the church and in our society a lot, we've sort of taken that to mean you have to be happy all the time. You have to just be glad about everything. You know, and James says, count it all joy when you encounter various trials, because you know the testing of your faith produces perseverance and all of these things. Um, and you know, so the scripture does say that, but it's like, so then, but if you know, if our emotions, if we are valid and important and all of these things, then what do we do with passages like that?
Perfect. So let me ask you this question. If the assumption that joy or, the heart or, quote unquote negative emotion, then what do you do with the passage that says John 11:35, Jesus wept?
Hmm. Yeah.
Was Jesus not joyful when he wept?
Well, and that one always confused me, honestly, reading it, because I was like, he knows what he's gonna do. He knows he's not like gonna stay dead. Why is he crying about it? You know, that one actually always really kind of bugged me, because I was like, Jesus, you're gonna raise him from the dead. Why are you crying about it? Like, what is yeah, so like I never really understood that. And you know, as growing up reading that story as, you know, as a kid or as a teenager, just like it makes no sense. But I think too a lot of it comes from maybe a sort of not a great definition of what joy is supposed to be, um and what gratitude is supposed to be. um you know, because yeah, I think in our society and in English, the language, you know, we conflate joy and happiness all the time, and we use them interchangeably, and we talk about enjoying life, and you know, and it's all just associated with just being carefree and happy all the time, and you're like, I'm excited about and then it's like a problem happens and you're like, I'm excited about this problem because I know in my mind that it will produce, you know, all of these good things and all of this growth in my life, so I am happy about it. But I feel like looking at it that way kind of misses something, but I'm not sure exactly what that something is, or how we rejoice in trials, you know, without being happy constantly, which is, yeah, I don't know.
I have a perfect example for you. I hate cardio. I absolutely hate cardio,
For someone who hates cardio, you do a lot of it.
right? But every time I wake up and I start to dress up, getting myself ready for the gym, there's this incredible feeling of I don't even know what. And it's almost like I am excited to go beat up my mind. I'm excited to go face this thing that I hate and beat it. I'm excited to go test myself. I'm excited to go walk in obedience. And it's not that I love cardio. In the moment while especially when I get on the bike, I'm like, why do I do this every morning? This sucks. But there's that dichotomy, the thing that tests you, the thing that tries you, the thing that stretches you also presents to you an opportunity to see yourself for where you are, and it presents you with an opportunity to grow and be better. So it's possible to feel, you know, like crap in the moment, but to find joy in the bigger picture.
Yeah. Well, that's like Paul too, where he says things like Christ, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross. Things like and we see Jesus like in the garden as well, like sweating blood and obviously not enjoying himself, but doing it anyway because of what he knew would come after. um and that's something, yeah, that totally makes sense. And I've heard a lot of people describe even like faith as a muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if you don't work it out, it gets flabby. If nothing ever tests your faith, it just what is your faith in then, at that point. And so yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So how does that, so you're saying kind of that feelings and actions don't necessarily go together, because you can feel like, on the one hand, you can have this emotion of being like, oh, I hate this is horrible, this is awful, but you do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know, how does that?
I don't think, and I think this goes back to what I was saying about having a framework for interpreting feelings,
Mm-hmm.
and continuing to learn how to interpret feelings. I don't think it's that they don't go together. I think they go together. We just need to have the right framework for interpreting how. So, um, someone who, when you get really good at running, right? And let's say it now starts to take like 10 miles before you start to feel like quitting, right? What happens is, basically you don't feel any resistance. So that first 10 miles doesn't feel like much, right? But someone that just starting 1 mile in, you feel like quitting. So the feeling is part of the journey of enjoyment. So, so um, to a softball player, I know this will resonate, right? To a softball player, right? If you go to a game and you just smash your opponent 20-0, right? Does that joy connect? Do you feel tested, right? If you never in doubt of losing, do
Mm-hmm.
you feel like you learned anything about yourself? If
Right.
you never had to go to a place where you had to resist the feeling of quitting, the feeling of whatever, all of those things that being in the pit brings out, right? But a game where you're down three. It's the last inning, like the World Series game that just happened. 6-7, and then you know you guys dug into the very last play, and then it looks like you're losing, and you just continue to work, and somehow it flipped, and you won the game, right? It's the feelings of quitting, of losing, of all of those things, and the choice to push through, right? Those feelings tell you this thing means something to me. This thing is important. This thing, um, I'm being tested. Those are all messages. Those are all data points. And it's kind of now how we choose to interpret. Like, if Jesus never sweat blood, how difficult really was dying at Gethsemane if he was just macho man that still went through everything he went through, but he never felt a need to, ask. We don't see him the same. We don't connect with him as a high priest the same. Those are the things that makes him human, because we realize that he felt what we feel when our body resists us in that moment, right? Um, so yeah, I don't know. I think it's just like maybe another example would be you go out in the rain and it's raining, and then you step out and 5 minutes later you're like, oh, I'm going back inside, and then we blame the rain. We say the rain is wrong. No, no, the rain is just the data point. It was touching your body, you were feeling cold, and you decided to go home. The rain is just a resistance. It's just a test that presented an opportunity for you to learn how to play in the rain, and you chose not to play in the rain. The rain is neither hot or cold, good or bad. The rain is just the rain.
So what I'm hearing is that it's less important the emotions themselves, and it's more important how we decide to respond to those emotions when they happen. And I think that's the interesting thing is like, yeah, we all have them. It happens. Things happen in our lives, and it's the most human thing in the world to have an emotional response to what's going on in our lives. And so I think that's the issue is like, then what do we do with that emotional response? How do we deal with it in a healthy way? And I like that, as we're talking about Christ's example and the two different examples, one of him weeping at the grave of Lazarus, who he's about to raise from the dead, and then the other where he's sweating blood in the garden, anticipating what's going to happen. And in both cases, and it's really interesting, and I kind of want to look at a little bit more that weeping at the grave of Lazarus a little bit, because to me, as I read that, it's almost more of a reaction of compassion for Mary and Martha and what they have just been through. And more so than his sadness for the death of his friend, because he knows what's about to happen. But he's weeping with them because they just lost their brother and they don't know what's coming. And so I think that plays into it as well, that idea of, and this is something Paul talks about as well, is weeping with those who weep and rejoicing with those who rejoice. So that's like a different flip side to it as well. So there's, on the one hand, there's the emotional reaction that we have, and then we have to decide what to do with that emotional reaction. And then there's the emotional reactions of the people around us, and we have to figure out what to do with those as well, and how to help, the people around us decide what to do with their emotions as well, which is a whole.
Yeah, it's so funny. It's so funny you touched on that. It's like we're basically tracking the same line, because I was going to go to mourning with those who mourn. So I've struggled with that verse because when people are mourning, I don't generally feel like, you know, I got stuff going on in my life that I should be mourning about, and I don't connect. Just don't feel, you know, I just don't feel the feelings. Whether that's because it's just the way I'm made or because I've locked it away, whatever the case may be, I just don't know how to like mourn and lament. And, you know, but I've also realized that it's not so much that I don't know, it's more like I don't sit in it long enough.
Mm,
Because when I find a space, so yesterday I think Kisha did an hour and a half period of lamenting for what's going on in Nigeria, and I joined it, and just kind of sitting in that issue for a while got me to a point where, I mean, I think I didn't tear up, but I felt really strong emotions, stronger than I felt about the whole thing for I don't know, the past 3, 4 weeks it's been going on. And so it kind of, brings kind of up that question of, I think in the case of Jesus, certainly I think he was entering into how they felt, and he was entering into how they felt. And I think he was taking that opportunity to mourn with them. He was taking that opportunity to be present. He was taking the opportunity to bond and to connect. Because when we talk about community, when we talk about love, that's the essence of it. I want you to feel what I feel. Like, if you ever are talking to a friend and you're trying to console a friend, there's an aspect of it where you help solve the friend's problem. But if all you're able to do is just solve the friend's problem and logically find an answer, there's a level of intimacy and connection that you don't have access to, because in that moment that person is feeling what they're feeling, and they also are looking for somebody that can enter into what they feel. And it's a lot of work, it's a lot of intentionality, it's a lot of yeah, it's a lot of, yeah, I think it's a lot of intentionality. And I think that's how, that's also what fosters community. That's also what fosters interpersonal bonds. That's also what deepens fellowship and all of that. And so I think part of it was, yeah, Jesus wanted to um, deepen his bond with Mary and Martha, and he chose to not let that opportunity go to waste, right?
mm,
Um, and I think no doubt, irrespective of knowing what would happen to Lazarus after, there was probably also the human element of looking around and maybe just being moved by the compassion other people had for Lazarus, or being moved by the work that maybe the being that Lazarus was to attract that many people and move them to that much tear.
mm.
Or maybe he was even thinking about, what would my life look like when I die? Will I be able to impact this many people? Will this many people care? I just never know. You just never know how much of it was for others, how much is it for himself. But there is that clarity that emotions are necessary, they're important,
Yeah.
and we have to enter into them. And so there's that. Whether or not they're personal or whether or not they're for others, right? And I think, for the one at Gethsemane, I think for me, there's no doubt in my mind that we would be living an incomplete life if we fail to learn how to connect with how we feel. And connecting with how we feel, unfortunately, it's messy, because um, 2 plus 2 is 4, absolute. The framework where we need to learn how to feel what we feel and how what we feel is saying, it's not a 2 plus 2 exercise. It's a continuous journey of finding other people that are like you, finding other people that have walked what you're walking before, finding other people that have learned from experiences similar to yours, sifting from what they have experienced, trying it out, seeing whether it worked or it didn't work, building on top of it. It's just a methodical, and for some, they're more naturally predisposed to being able to do it because maybe they're just naturally chemically more in, more in touch with their emotions. um and for some maybe they're just not, and it's a little bit more labor of love to get there. But I think that balance is in connecting with the two and finding harmony between the two. And I think what also makes it very interesting is because the emotions often presents data that feels counter to the logical. In the same way that if you are looking at um, a piece of real estate from front and back, um, yes, it's natural to complete. It's very rare for the front and the back of something to be identical. So if you hop on a call and you tell me, describe the house, it's gonna be very rare if you're looking at the house from completely opposite angles for them to describe the same thing. And I think the emotions and the facts are describing things from two very opposite angles.
Mm.
And so what the evidence they bring forward is not gonna reconcile. We would have to do that labor of, okay, at what point, um, hey, you standing square opposite to each other, I want you to come right. Hey, I want you to come left. At some point, you guys are gonna meet, and then when you meet, you start to see the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay, repeat the same thing the other direction. You go left, you go right, you meet. When you meet, tell me what you see. And I think that's the work of. That's why I was saying facts and feelings, um, um, they're both data points, right? It's just a question of which one, how would you reconcile the two? And it's that kind of framework of choice, if you will, that eventually helps us to kind of reconcile the two.
Yeah. So I think, I think that helps it make a little bit more sense in terms of, how they can a lot of times feel so different from each other, but also neither one is necessarily wrong. It's just different. Um, and so I want to touch on kind of one other aspect, kind of before we end. Um, and that's kind of the idea of when emotions become unhealthy. And I think we've kind of touched on one way they can be unhealthy, which is when we just choose to ignore them and throw them out and be like, and just, whatever. But on the other, I think it's possible to also go to the other extreme, and to be like so rooted in the emotional response and none of the facts that you go totally to the opposite end of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's also possible as well to be, deceived as well, and to have your emotional response be based on something that isn't true, um, like, and I'm trying to think of a good example of this, and I don't have one off the top of my head, but so I don't know what would, I don't know where I'm going.
So that there's that verse that says, "The heart of a man is deceitfully wicked."
Yeah.
And I think that we can almost use that as the big, because I think that we're basically coming right back around to the initial question.
Yeah.
Um, what is deceit?
It's lies, basically.
What is lies? So let's strip out deceit from lies.
Okay.
I think, yeah, let's strip out deceit from lies. So in my mind, lie is I'm presenting falsehood. Um, yeah, I'm presenting falsehood. What else? Yeah, I'm presenting falsehood, and I'm maybe getting you. I'm just presenting falsehood. Let me just stop there. Deceit for me is I am driving. I'm there's an aim, there's a goal, there's an action. Maybe I want to elicit, right? Or to create, or I want to whatever, and I have to connect your truth, right? Just enough truth for you to take that action or for you to believe or accept or whatever. I need to connect just enough truth. And it doesn't even matter if there's no lie in it. As long as I get you to take that action, the degree of inadequacy or incorrect or lack of fact or true whatever is not the point. The point is okay, because and maybe we could look up the definition of deceit to make it, but for me, I guess the piece that I'm trying to highlight is deceit oftentimes has a lot of um, truth in it. In fact, it has majority truth in it
Yeah, so
because
I just looked it up just because I'm curious. It's the action or practice of deceiving someone by concealing or misrepresenting the truth.
there you go.
Yeah,
So even if you listen to that definition, concealing or misrepresenting, it's more of you toggle between misrepresentation or receiving because your focus is on creating an outcome, right?
hmm,
And
yeah, yeah,
so you play with you don't necessarily want to lie. You just and a huge chunk of it is about what does that person believe, what have they accepted as true, and how can I play with that to get them to be or do what I need, right?
right, right,
A lie is I don't really care if you accept what I'm saying or if you would, like, if you ask me, someone a guy cheated on his wife and you ask him, hey, did you cheat on me? It's like, no, I didn't. And it's like he doesn't care if maybe that's in the situation. You can have one or two where deceit would be him trying to make sure that she believes him and acts accordingly, and he
right.
would go to whatever length to highlight how he did it. What? That's one. Lie would be, no, I didn't, and just move on.
Yeah,
And it's like I don't care if you believe it or not. I'm just telling you that I didn't. Whether you accept it or not, I'm not gonna try to make you believe it or
right.
da, 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 right.
It's like all lies are deceit, but not all deceit is lies.
All lies are deceit, but not all deceit is lies. All lies. Sure, sure,
Something like
sure.
that. Yeah.
Something like that. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So I think when the scripture is saying the heart of man is deceitfully wicked, or however it's phrased, um, I think going to that example of misrepresenting truth and concealing truth, I think yes, the heart of man um, you know does do that. But I think that doesn't. Okay, let me backtrack. When it comes to, for me anyways, when it comes to this issue of how much truth and how much whatever, I think it just comes to this question of balance. which we all love and hate. Um,
So easy to say and so hard to do.
exactly. So I think um, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to deceive an educated person in the area that they are educated in.
Right.
Um, and when we're talking about the area they're educated in, what we're really saying is they have learned facts. They have been deeply immersed in facts. They have thorough understanding of all of the things that come into play and blah 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 blah, right?
Yeah.
Such that they can tell, what is true and what's not. So I think the issue is, if you have somebody that prints money and you give them counterfeit dollars,
Mhm.
right? You're probably not going to get them to buy into whatever your counterfeit dollars is. And so I think for us, our job is to get immersed in truth such that our emotions, right? Such that our emotions um, um, align with um, so our emotions align with what is true.
Yeah. I feel like we've
Our,
gone full circle all the way back to that earlier thing we were talking about with the train and and the feeling.
yes, yes, but I guess the nuance that I'm saying here
Mhm.
is, um, the nuance that I'm saying here is it's not so much that our emotions, um, it's not so much that, okay, so I'll give you an example. Um, the only examples I can think, I don't know why all the examples I think of are related to breakup, and I don't want to use that. But I think it's probably the closest when you're talking heart issue,
Sure.
whatever.
Yeah.
So let me use it. So if 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 you're in a relationship and it's a first one and you're immature emotionally and somebody breaks up with you and your immediate reaction is, so your feeling is gonna tug and say, you suck, you're not enough, you're whatever. That's how you're interpreting how you are feeling.
Yeah.
You're just feeling hurt,
Right.
but your mind starts to, so thoughts start to arise from how you feel, and you
Yes.
ascribe untruths
Yes.
to those feelings, right?
Yeah.
Fast forward 10 years later, the same thing happens. Somebody breaks up with you. You're still hurt, but you no longer think those thoughts because you know what is true.
Right.
So it's not that it's not the feelings that are wrong. The feelings probably stay the same, maybe
Like you
not
still are hurt.
hurt,
Yes. Yes.
right? But you are educated, you're informed, you have facts, you have understanding, you have more experience, you have more whatever of truth to be
Yes.
able to put those emotions where they belong.
Yeah. So I think with that too, as a note of application, then, it's important for us as humans to, in times when we are not in emotional distress, to be filling our minds with truth so that when the
Yes,
emotional distress comes, we're prepared for it and we
yes,
have the truth to say, okay, yes, it hurts. It's horrible. I don't feel good about it, but I know all of the true things, and that is protecting me from allowing my mind to go to add these false labels to the emotions that I'm feeling. Is that kind of what you're going for?
yes. To actually take it one step further, I don't even think it's limited to when you're sane. I think
Yes,
even
we should
when you're
always fill our
even
minds with
yes,
truth.
I think
Yeah.
even when you're hurting, even when your emotions are saying something, right? I think even then, even more important then, it's important that we go educate ourselves on what the emotion is trying to communicate, instead
Yes.
of lazily ascribe what
Yes.
is not true to what we feel, and then drive actions that are not wholesome.
Right. It's like when the check engine light turns on, you know, not just first of all not saying not ignoring it and saying it's going to be fine, I'm just going to not pay attention to it, I'm going to cover it up with a piece of tape, it's going to be fine, and not fix the problem. That's like one extreme. But then the other extreme would be like, oh no, the check engine light is on, I'm going to now take apart my entire car and throw everything away and try to figure out what to do. Instead it's like, oh, the check engine light is on, this isn't good, I need to go and learn the thing that is wrong with my car, and the deeper issue that is under the hood, and get it checked out and get it worked on, maybe with the help of someone else who knows what they're doing, and get it fixed. Yeah, that,
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
it's exactly that. And I think yeah, so the way I would read that verse that says the heart of man is deceitfully wicked
Mhm.
would kind of be similar to saying, the check engine light or the transmission light is incredibly it's an incredibly expensive signal. It's like, yes, but I don't think it's like, I don't think it means that the signal by itself is good or bad.
Yeah,
I think it's just
it's just a
a
signal.
it's just a signal.
Yeah.
Um, um, yeah, so I think for us, right, the call there is to kind of, yeah, like you said, reconcile how we feel, right, with what we believe and what we know, and try to take the time for them to come together and agree, because
Mhm.
there is, in a place of balance, they coexist beautifully.
Yes, and I think that's the hardest part is it's very easy, I think, to know the facts, to understand the truth mentally, and to have all of the to be able to say all the right things at the right time, and to be able to spit back information. It's quite another thing when you're going through something horrible, um to have internalized that so much that you're able to still, in the midst of a challenge or in the midst of a trial, to still be able to live your life as if those things are true. And I think that's where the faith comes in, because faith is not just believing something or saying you believe in it. Faith is an action. Faith is living your life as if what you believe is true, you know and I think that's a lot of times where the disconnect happens, where it's like, we know it up here, we have such a hard time aligning our feelings or our emotional response, or what we choose to do with our emotions, or the labels we put on our emotions, with the facts that we know to be true. Like that process you're saying of looking at the house from opposite sides, it's very difficult to bring those two things together. Yeah.
I think the reason is because we stay we stay in the positions we started with, and magically hope that the house on both sides will just start to look together or look the same.
Yeah.
There has to be a coordinated effort, right? If you're on the right side, you have to move left. At the same time, the person on the left side has to move right for you to meet.
Right. What
You're
does
gonna have
Oh, sorry, finish what you were saying.
you're gonna have a lot of times when what's on the left will go left, what's on the right will go left, and it feels like they're catching each other's tail.
Yeah.
And then right, and then it's the pace. Maybe what's the one on the left is actually maybe sprinting, and then the one on the on the right is actually walking. So they're both maybe going the same direction, but they still catch up, but because one was sprinting and one was walking, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like a perfect science of, you know, there's maybe a shorter route, but we don't often get there through the shorter route. But the healthy space is when those two meet, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
It's it's interesting because I think, as I kind of described earlier, my own process of things, where it's like the say one side of the house is facts and the other side of the house is feelings. It's pretty much always been the facts one just stays where it is, and the feelings has to come over to where the facts are. Which, is one way of doing it, but it's also, yeah, maybe not the healthiest way of doing it. But yeah, what does that process look like of bringing those two things into alignment? And we talked about, filling our minds with truth constantly, in season and out of season. What are there other, yeah, what else would you say is involved in that process?
Education. I think what generally happens is, um, we again, education has many different forms. Think of school, right? There's math, there's biology, there's social science, there's um, you know chemistry, physics, there's BI 101, there's hermeneutics,
My
right?
favorite.
So there's so many areas of education, and that's just to get a degree, right? So when we're talking, for them, those things kind of coming together, I think that process is really um, immersing ourselves holistically, non-biased ways of just from seeking truth from as many perspectives that are applicable. Um, yeah, seeking truth from as many perspectives that are applicable. So, sometimes, let's look at somebody that's emotionally hurt, right? Um, um, Sometimes you would very quickly arrive at the logical thing to do and have a hard time getting yourself to do it. Um, and then you go through therapy, and in therapy, they ask you some questions that you wouldn't ask yourself, or or you have to go to places that you don't want to go. That's education, right?
Yeah. It's
Um,
like learning
you
about yourself and maybe
learn about
places that you
yourself.
haven't even looked at before. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. Because a doctor, for example, has a generic understanding of the anatomy of a human body, right? But did you know that your lungs and my lungs are not positioned in the exact same ratio or position, right? Internally, some people's lungs are smaller, some people's lungs are bigger. You know, some people have 8 ribs or however many. Some people have 6, right? Um, some people have eyes that are bigger. So and if you're doing surgery, precision is important. Literally, if you hear stories of people where they got gunshot and the shot missed them by millimeters, right? So the specific anatomy. So what we learned, so the therapist would have maybe a general design of how the body is, like the emotional anatomy of a person, right? And there's people that are continuing to pour over and learn about what that anatomic design looks like. But then you have to take your own mind and your own specific anatomy, emotional anatomy, and present it to someone that has that expert knowledge of the, and then it is in that marriage of their understanding of your, anatomy and schematics, the general human, whatever, emotional anatomy, and your specific, it's when you bring those two together that you now have maybe, you get understanding of what your data, your body has been saying, what your emotions have been saying, but you didn't have the design to interpret. And they have a compass that helps you know which area of questions to kind of spur and bring out that data, right?
Yeah.
So that's a form of education. And depending on, what you need to learn, sometimes those questions come from a therapist. Sometimes those questions come from the Holy Spirit. Sometimes those questions come from reading scripture. Sometimes those questions come from helping other people through stuff. Sometimes those questions come from listening to a sermon, right? So where that education comes from, I don't think, in the same way that even physical education, our mind is, we educate our mind from pastors, from politicians, from music, from, conversations on the street. In the same way, so there's not a limit to where those education happens, but we need to be intentional to seek out those education so that both areas find unison and agree and connect.
Yeah. Yeah. I have I have nothing to add to that.
Okay. So that's good. Yeah. So and I think, like, for me, like, taking personal, because I know we said we're gonna try to, okay, what did we learn? How are we gonna apply it? And so I'll start, and then you can share that.
Sure.
So for me, I think it's pretty neat because I've been on this journey of how do I listen to how I feel, one, but also how do I wait on God? And here's what's funny. I don't know if there's a link, but I believe there is a link. I believe my ability to um, um, listen to how I feel, it feels eerily similar to the process of waiting on God. And
Mm.
so I don't know, I don't want to say, because, some people will say there's a God within all of us, and, we just need to, that's not what I'm saying at all. But I do believe that it's quite possible that just as my mind was created by God, and logic is and intellect is a gift He's given us for us to process and think through this world, and it's a way that we can discern, and discernment and all of that. You know, how much of logic is discernment and spirit filled? How much of logic is just human wisdom? I don't know, but I know discernment flows through logic, right? And I think, in the same way, I think discernment also flows through emotions. And so it's kind of interesting. So I think for me, like, the takeaway is um, really putting voice to the process of reconciling how I feel with what I think, and being comfortable taking the time when needed, to 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 align both of those things, knowing that the truth um, the truth is the truth is in unison, right? Not in just like, leadership 101, you build consensus, and the process of building consensus with other people says it doesn't matter if what your decision is correct. If you building consensus is like being more correct, because if your choice is typically right, and you're not bulldozing people over the head with it, right? Generally, more people over time will see it and get behind and own it. And so waiting for my mind and my spirits and my emotions to connect and align, it's a more richer experience. It's a more total self. Um, 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 it's basically putting as much of yourself behind the actions that you're taking. And yeah, so you know, um, so there's that. And I think, I guess the second part of that is, I think, you know, God speaks in many different ways, and to it's very limiting when I just choose to do what sounds good. I think it even limits what's true, right? Um, 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 because as much as my emotions can be deceived, my logic is constantly deceived because it's limited by the information it has processed. Um, so, application wise, I'm gonna slow down and wait and 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 hear what my, I don't know what the difference between emotions and God is, but I'll just kind of lump them together and say will give I'll make sure to give God more opportunities to speak through how I feel and what my gut is saying, as much as what I think is right based on His word.
Yeah. I think for me, the biggest thing, and this is something that has been kind of a theme of my life for I think the past several months, is just the idea of not covering up the engine light, the check engine light, of don't put tape over it and ignore it and pretend it's going to go away, but to do the hard work of digging in and being like, all right, we feel this, and that's okay, and now where is it coming from and what do we do with it? I think, yeah, there have been a few sort of exercises that I have gone through in different Bible studies in the past couple months that have, yeah, brought up themes of that nature. And so yeah, it's something that's kind of been in my mind for a while, and it's something that I think God is continuing to work with me on. And then in addition to that, kind of like we were talking about earlier, is, yeah, learning how to weep with those who weep and just not fix the externals, but to, like you were saying before, just to be okay with sitting in it, um, which is really uncomfortable. um, but is a lot of times really is what's needed. And so, yeah, learning how to do that, while still, like we were saying, also filling our minds with truth constantly. Um, yeah, I think that's what's been really standing out to me through all of this.
No, I like your answer, and I'm almost gonna steal all of it for myself too, because yeah, I feel like mine was a logical exercise again. Logically breaking apart. What did we just talk about? Unless I like those action points. So I think you said um, um, either creating the space or entering the space to mourn with those who mourn, and sit in uncomfortable spaces until, or not, emotions, you connect with the emotions other people feel or that you feel, right? So that's one application I heard you say there, and I think I definitely need to do the same. I think the other one you gave was that just in general, over, not shutting off the feelings and the sensors, right?
Mm-hmm.
But kind of, yeah, I think I'll just twist that for myself again and say almost educating myself on those, right?
Yeah.
So as I'm educating my logical, intellectual, whatever, also making sure to educate my emotional um, um, side.
Yeah, and I think part of that for me too has been just educating myself on myself. Going back and looking at some things where it's or like having an emotional response to something and going, why am I having such a strong emotional response to this thing? And usually it's because of something like further back, you know, and yeah, educating myself on myself, like, oh, these are the things that really bring up those responses for me. Why is that? And what is it that I haven't addressed, from maybe a long time ago? Something else happened that I never dealt with, and then it's coming back in weird ways later, and things like that. And so yeah, I like what you were saying there about education, how it doesn't always necessarily have to be just, oh, I'm going to read a bunch of nerdy books. It can also be it can be, introspection and self-examination. It can be, observing other people and how they react to things. It can be talking to someone who has had similar experiences in their life. It can be, any number of those things. And all of that is useful. Yeah. So I appreciate that a lot. That was an interesting way of looking at it that I hadn't really thought of. So yeah.
Well, full disclosure, I don't use therapy as much as I don't. So therapy is one area that I know I need to use, but I've fallen in love with introspection so much that I'm like, but so I think I've been leveraging mentorship, which that was a hard breakthrough for me. I've always kind of leveraged introspection, but I'm leveraging it heavily now. But I definitely need to. So like, I would say mentorship would be like someone that's walked a path before.
Mm,
Introspection is going through and painfully walking the path,
yeah.
whether in the past. And I think therapy is like, not necessarily someone that's walked the path, but someone that has helped so many people walk the path and has a blueprint, like a teacher.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily need to have been an engineer to be able to teach you engineering concepts, but they've formed or they've learned or they have the data around the blueprint or the design or the whatever
Yeah.
to be able to help me process. And I don't do that one enough.
Mm,
So that's one I think to call out for myself, to potentially explore. Okay,
good stuff.
I think we have come to the end of
I think so.
another amazing one. So um, yeah, so you want to close us out in prayer?
Sounds good. Lord God, we just thank you so much just for this time and for this discussion. And I know this is a discussion that's really personal for both of us as we both seek to kind of navigate these difficult waters of balancing, head knowledge with emotions and what's true and what isn't, and all of these things and all of these gray areas, Lord. And so I pray that you would just give us wisdom going forward on the best ways to educate ourselves and build just continue to build our relationship with you as we grow and continue to seek to follow you in all of these areas, Lord. And so I just thank you for this conversation and for just, yeah, the joy that it was to just explore all of these different things and talk it out. And so I just thank you for all of these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Cool. Okay.